Welcome, everyone, to our second episode of UnHypnotized. We are so thrilled to have you here, and we're extra thrilled to have our guest today, Scott Dedels, to delve more into his book, The Dao of Bitcoin, and of course, get into the conversations of becoming free and living a life of inner peace and hope and harmony along with this conversation of dabbling into Bitcoin too. So, welcome, Scott. It's so great to have you here. Did you want to tell us anything about yourself before we get started?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I always enjoy an opportunity to talk about these things. So about me, I'm a Canadian Bitcoin personality, I guess you could say, and 20 years sort of studying Eastern philosophy and mysticism. It's the intersection of the two was something I started thinking about almost immediately as I became aware and really started spending my time studying Bitcoin. So that all kind of culminated in writing the book, which was published this spring in April.
Right. So it's still fresh, hot off the presses.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Excellent, excellent. Right. And we have like the two Canadians we have two Canadians on the show today. So that's great. So with this book, so the Tao of Bitcoin, and I know some of our viewers might not be familiar with the Tao, and some might not be familiar with Bitcoin. And now I know you wrote a whole book on it. And I know there's concepts that have layers to them, but can you just give us a short description of the Tao and of Bitcoin, please?
Sure. Yeah. I'll take a stab separately, one at a time.
Good.
Taoism is an ancient religious and philosophical tradition that emerged out of early China, sometime sort of around 400 BC, and has to do with the belief in sort of a universal cosmic procedure, a central force that is responsible for arranging the ongoing and repeating cycles of sort of life and death, and the interconnectedness of all things. So that force is called the Tao, and the Tao is this sort of thing that binds us all together and is responsible for the endless creation that we see in the world, life cycles, and it is also sort of a thing that is the study of Taoism is something that is a mixture of what is felt in the body and what is sort of reasoned in the mind. And the Eastern tradition, I think this is a really interesting and important thing to think about with Taoism as it compares to more Western ideas. A kind of seminal moment in Western way of making sense of the universe was French philosopher René Descartes talking about cogito ergo sum, which is I think, therefore I am. And this is really something that was a foundational moment for the way Western people conceptualize our place in the universe, which is to say that I exist because I have a mind. And in that assertion, what we're really saying is the mind is separate from the body. And so in Taoism, it's really a view of the opposite, of oneness, of everything being part of oneness. And so the mind and body are a single entity. And this is a belief that, when you're having a relationship with the Tao, it is something that is not only thought about, but it is also felt. And this was where I was talking about offline before we started, but it makes even writing about the subject a little bit tricky, because you really are meant to experience something, and that experience, when it is in its most pure form, is almost absent of thoughts that are made permanent by words and constructing ideas around them. But that's a tough thing to do without writing words, if you're trying to write a book about it. So Yeah, so that would be my short overview of what Taoism is all about.
Okay. I'll say a couple things just to that before we get into Bitcoin, because it's true. It's like if you can describe it, you don't get it.
Hmm.
And I think that's always helpful to say, especially when we are speaking to a practice. It reminds me of the metaphysical reasons for physical illnesses that I learned to work with over the course of my hypnosis career, and what parts to address, and really taking into account that the body and the mind are one,
Hmm.
and that we can't discount that how we feel, and what is happening around us, what is happening in our body, what is happening in our lives, what is happening in our minds, can direct us to a path of harmony inside and outside in our world.
Absolutely.
Right. I love that. Okay. So, and what about Bitcoin?
Hmm. Bitcoin is a technical innovation solving a number of different problems of money. And so, money is a technology, something that we developed uh, throughout human history and have improved over time, was initially required to solve something called the coincidence of wants, which is an economic problem where in a community or in a group of people, if I have turnips and you have milk and we each want the thing the other has, then that's very simple. But as soon as economies become more complicated and multiple types of trades are required, the likelihood that everyone simply has the thing that the other person wants becomes smaller and smaller. So money was developed to solve that problem and create a way for people to a medium of exchange. And over time, money has evolved to do different things. And over the last sort of 100 years, it has become a, a system that is controlled by central banks. And so the way our money works, as long as everyone has been alive, is we use highly recognizable, colorful pieces of paper that have recognizable faces, monarchs and historical figures, so that people can have an association with something and understand that a number on that thing is a representative of a language of value. And that is that technology that's a stage in the evolution of money, which enabled goods and services to really start moving around the globe. Like the last 100 years is when we really saw an explosion of global trade. With the information age, everything started to move online, I would say, at the turn of the century. And, like in 1999, the McDonald's webpage didn't have really anything on it. It was just like a landing page. And they actually didn't own McDonald's.com. They had to buy it from somebody who had the domain, some guy like Jim McDonald. And today, McDonald's is like a huge percentage of their sales through their website, through online traffic. So when the internet was coming of age, what was missing was a payments protocol, a way to embed an exchange of value into the newly emerging digital world. And Bitcoin is the first protocol that successfully solved a number of different technical problems that were required that weren't available when the internet was invented. And like a lot of different technologies, you also couldn't stream 4K video on a handheld device when the internet was invented. So these are subsequent innovations. In solving that problem, or in solving a number of those problems, the output, one of the most important problems, was how to prevent counterfeiting and fraudulent transactions. And without getting too technical about it, the way that problem was solved produced a money that had a finite supply. And this is a massive innovation forward in money, because all other monies operating in the world today, even in post-Bitcoin world, do not have a finite supply. So it makes this really sort of a binary thing. It's like a step function improvement. When you have a money that has the total amount of that money is continually expanding and growing, It's like the bottom half of a fraction trying to measure, if you have 1/4, we know what 1 out of 4 is. We know what 1 out of 8 is. If the number on the bottom is always growing, then it's hard to determine what the number on the top is actually worth. And so with Bitcoin, we have now the ability to price things in a system where the bottom number on the fraction doesn't change. And it's almost like has the potential to be like the metric system for money.
Yeah, I knew that you would say it in a way that I hadn't thought of it quite yet. And I really like that visual of the fraction. And then also, the more conversations that I've been having about Bitcoin to local business owners and people in my industry of like the wellness or holistic health industry. And we always end up coming across the same thing, like our money just keeps going less far. Like,
Mm-hmm.
as things go up, what we earn and keep doesn't. And I think that's a really nice point to shine a light on, especially for anyone coming new to Bitcoin or even people that are here that still are maybe in it for this kind of try to get rich quick idea, or, try to just like get something right away from it instead of understanding the ethos and the voting that they're doing by choosing Bitcoin. That is not just for the technology or even the ease of transaction, but it's also for putting your energy and your own hard-earned money into something that is creating a world that you want to see more of.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought of it, even before I found Bitcoin, I always thought I'm voting with my dollar. Like how I spend my money is choosing what kind of world I want. And that's how I started to see Bitcoin in that sense. Like, right, this is like something that you can choose to I don't really want to say to support, but I guess participate in if you really do want a world that is for the abundance of all.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that the problems of money can be very difficult for people to parse out because money is really a system that we're adopted into at birth. And
Mhm.
it works very differently depending on where it is that you grew up. But, most people stay in the country they were born, into their adult lives. And you might start traveling after, but
Mhm.
that's most people. So, we have these sort of like formative foundational ideas about value, and they are very different depending on where you come from all over the world. Like not every part of the world has credit cards, not every part of the world saves for retirement, not every, in Canada we have our own very unusual, we've hyper financialized a number of different assets in Canada, and that is kind of unique to Canada. So people love how the price of houses have gone up over the last 20 years if they were, beneficiaries of that increase in price. But that's really just something that's happened here as a result of, people have in as this as this human civilization, as we have evolved and perfected this technology of money over centuries, what we've also done is sort of hone this collective intelligence of understanding what money is. So we've never, until the last 100 years or so, this central bank era, being told what money is. This is something we've figured out. Money became money because it exhibited the properties of money. It was able to fulfill this function of solving the coincidence of wants. It was something that was desirable, something that people would want to accumulate and hold. So this is why things like precious metals have a long time-tested success of being money. And paper money is really different because we are just told it's money because it has the picture of someone we recognize on it and a number. And our local central bank has told us it's money. But other than that, it really doesn't have the characteristics of money. because one of the most important features of money is a store of value. It should be able to retain its value over time. And every money in the world today is terrible at this. They're just terrible to varying degrees. So our Canadian dollar, as an example, is just less terrible at retaining its value than the Venezuelan bolivar, but not that much worse. It's just your time, like your time scale. So the Canadian dollar has also lost 100% of its value over the last, call it 100 years or 90 years. And so that's pretty bad. It's just that that's slightly longer than a single human lifespan. So people aren't, like really, it's a difficult thing for an individual person to quantify, because it happens if they do it just right. And this is what is so bizarre about people even being excited about a 2% target inflation. A 2% target inflation means that every 36 years, half your money is gone. And that's half your life. The average person, call it whatever, the lifespan 75, 80 years. So roughly, of course, so of course it's, we have to work so hard to plan for the future, because it's not like we're planning for the future on a stationary playing field that's not moving. We're actually planning for the future on a treadmill that's accelerating every year. So the game gets progressively, if it feels like the game is getting progressively harder, it's because it is. And the really tricky thing about it is the game's not broken. It's functioning exactly as it's designed. So that's not an indictment of it. This is just how it works. When you continually make more money all the time, the money that existed before will become less valuable during into the future. So there's nothing mysterious about this.
Yeah. Like it's the model. I love that, because I think people do need to question that model. And, I always start to feel some type of way the more that I hear people talk about this. And I'm just like, "Ugh," because I know, and Dave and I, we explored this in our first episode, The Great Malaise, of just why we might be feeling the way that we're feeling without really realizing, and how understanding this kind of treadmill that we're on can be really helpful to, again, tune into that maybe even lack of harmony that we're experiencing in our mind and our body. And that's really where I do want to take this conversation, because there's so many aspects to your book that I feel like are very unique to what you've got to say. Because if people want to learn more about this, there's a lot of other books in the market about money and Bitcoin, right? And so you did, right from the beginning of the book, you had me at Wayne Dyer because I love Wayne Dyer, and Wayne Dyer has just been really instrumental in my own journey, which was like many practitioners, healing myself, and then having a career of healing others. And the journey never ends in terms of self-exploration, learning lessons. And one of my favorite Wayne Dyer quotes is, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." And just the man, over the whole course of his life, like I was at the Hay House conference this spring in Phoenix, and the spirit of Wayne Dyer is just in this whole conference, because he just touched so many people and wrote so much about his own exploration of these things. And I kept coming back to your book and, the way I might think about the interconnected of things, or mind, thought, and consciousness. And I'm wondering, because I never see the word spirit or spiritual or soul in the book. And I do see the Tao as like a set of principles, or principles to live by in harmony with yourself and life, which to me is like a spiritual practice. So would you consider the Tao a spiritual practice?
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe to address the absence of that word is back to this idea that it's a, however you want to quantify what an individual person is, I think it's the whole of everything. So your consciousness and your spirit and your body, in my mind, it's really, Taoism, I think, is an experience of the universe, and not any one part of you. The goal really is to have all aspects of you sharing that experience simultaneously. Like that's the state of, that is the state of like connectedness.
Mhm. That's what I really liked about it, because I felt that using that framework of the Tao, and then, how you chose to write about it in in connection with Bitcoin, but also in connection to how it can teach us lessons in life. Like, life will keep teaching us lessons if we're willing to see, willing to feel. And, in my own writing, that's been something that I've struggled a bit with, because if we start using these words too much, spirit and soul, and I've even done this for myself, because once I, started off working in the subconscious, like the subconscious mind, which is where a hypnotist generally takes the person and spends time in. And then after doing that so many thousands of times, it inevitably came more about the subconscious mind being the doorway to the superconscious mind.
Hmm.
And this interconnectedness, or this force, or this source, or this energy that became really like really fertile for awakening.
Hmm.
Because I feel like when we're still at that level, at least for me, when I was still at that level of subconscious, it was really focused on like trying to change things to feel better, or trying to change things to get ahead, trying to change things to succeed. And then as soon as that portal, so to speak, opened up to be more about the oneness and more about the energy of all things, along with the behaviors, the habits, and the doing. And I do have a couple of things I want to get into with your book. So the first one is, this idea of once you see things, you can't unsee them. And that's what I started to realize in my work. Like, once we go through that door of the super conscious, so to speak, and there's an awakening, you don't go back. And even for myself, I had my first awakening actually when I first lived in Calgary, and I saw, there was just so much more. And then that started my healing journey, so to speak. And then it's definitely not my second, because, rebirth is a constant cycle. But another awakening I had was Bitcoin and the financial system. And again, once you see, you can't unsee. So, yeah, how can you speak to that, especially about the Tao?
Hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I say like you, a little bit more information about myself. I came from traditional financial services, so I've been working in that world since 2008, and so I had a real awakening and an unlearning that had to happen about all of the preconceived ideas I had about money and investing and wealth accumulation and wealth protection. And yeah, I mean, that's a good tidbit for me. If anyone, I think maybe people are always wondering, like, who's this guy? Why is he talking about that? Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest things with this idea of the problem of money isn't something it's not insignificant, because while that hamster wheel is getting harder and harder, what that's doing for us is it's giving us less and less time. And things, I think like people have observed accelerating pace of everything over the last, whatever, call it 10, 15 years. And I kind of quantify that as we've watched, we used to watch TV programs with commercials, and then we started watching like 22-minute shows on Netflix, and then like Instagram reels, and then it was like TikTok. And now it's like, if you don't catch someone's attention in the first 7 seconds of a TikTok they're swiping, right? So like it's this compression of our attention span. It's relentless march towards, like, I don't know how small that number can get. But what's happening is, it's as the hamster wheel speeds up, we have no way to regulate our consumption of time. And so as we have less time, we have less ability to be present. And that is the real catastrophic effect of people's ability to see what's going on, to be with their, to enjoy their lives. I think like where people get mixed up often with wanting to be wealthy. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be wealthy, but I think what most people genuinely want is autonomy over their time. And they may not even really have sat with that properly, because really to do that, you kind of have to have this awakening to understand that your time has been taken from you. And we not only is it that the time has been taken from us, but the time that we have left, we actually often volunteer, we give it away to stupid, to time wasters, because 5 minutes isn't enough to do something maybe meaningful, drop into a conversation with a friend. So you might just doom scroll, or do these are the pleasures of the day, right? So yeah, I think this concept of and it's a money's, as money becomes progressively worth less, what that's doing is devaluing the time of your life that you spent to earn that money. So what we're really trying to do when we are converting our time and energy into money is preserve that energy that we have converted into value so that we can use it in the future. And when we're forced to use a money that can't effectively perform that function, essentially our life is being stolen from us and our time is being devalued.
Great way to say that. I think of it as a dark night of the soul. A lot of people think of it as a fall from innocence. And I think it is nice to put a little focus on that, just because sometimes when you pause, you have that moment, or you're taking more moments of presence, which in my notes of in your book, I found myself writing that a lot, presence. And in that presence is pain,
Hmm.
especially at first when you first have to see something that you did, or that you got caught up in, or that you didn't know until you knew. You didn't see until you saw. And this is also why so many people, I think, say Bitcoin is hope, because the worst part is like when you see it, but then you can't see a way out of it.
Yeah, I think like for me, and this is why I've sort of dedicated my life to helping people understand
Mhm.
Bitcoin, is because it's not just that it's hope. If Bitcoin were to disappear tomorrow, it's hard to imagine having hope. So
Mm.
for me, it's much more than hope. It is a way forward for everyone. And this is the best part about Bitcoin, is that it is something that you can participate in voluntarily. There are people who figured it out earlier than others, but no one has unfair access to information that other people don't. No one has any control over how it works more than anyone else. And so this is just this is another reason why it represents an improvement to previous iterations of money, because this has been a recurring problem with every form of money that has come before it, especially in terms of paper money, is when people are entrusted to be the ones running how a money works, they become, victim to the irresistible temptation to use that power for betterment of themselves. And that's just how it is, unfortunately. So what we really need as a species is a form of money that takes the people out of money. Now, Bitcoin requires people, but those people are forced by the rules of how it works, so in such a way that they have to cooperate. And even people who have different goals are still sort of compelled to cooperate. And this is a beautiful part about Bitcoin, and why it also, I think, has such like a healing energy for people, because money and things that can be confiscated, these are the reasons why we have had basically a century of continuous war. And this is also something that Bitcoin can and will solve, because it is next to impossible to confiscate Bitcoin by force, by physical force. So, especially at a nation state level, if we get to a place where countries are holding Bitcoin in a super secure way, there's not going to be much point to try to invade another country to take their stuff, because it would be unsuccessful. So there are massive ramifications for the way we think about human civilization that all cascade out of this sort of watershed moment, whenever it is that enough people alive understand all of the different cool things that will happen as a result of Bitcoin. And the unfortunate part today, and this is why it's exciting, but today most people just think it's internet money, it's possibly a scam, it is maybe a Ponzi. None of those are true, but these are where we are now.
Yeah, and that's how I always know when I'm on to something juicy and good for humanity, is just all the haters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's just been a marker over the course of my life. Like, I remember even when I was just uh we're working on like healing with Whole Foods, just like the names that people would call me and the things like that, the rage that it would cause people just to say like, yeah, you can heal yourself out with how you eat. And now that's just common knowledge, whether or not everyone embraces it or not, it's common knowledge. So that's another thing that really piqued my interest about Bitcoin. I'm like, ooh, all the people that just want to, make this another crypto or turn this into something other than it is. Sure, maybe they don't understand it, and I have no hate for that. But also, I think it's really indicative of when we're on to something good, something that can really provide light and change. And I like what you said about hope, because that's how I started to see it too, because I always have a tendency to be very aware when I or my clients are putting anything outside of themselves as the answer. If we're looking for security in Bitcoin, or we're looking for security in our fiat job, even, it's really all a false sense of security compared to like the security that you find in yourself. And then, especially as you learn to, live in harmony and interconnectedness, like, say, the, the concepts or the way of the Dao, let's say the way of the Dao. And one thing I really liked about what you've written about here, because I've already been experiencing since reading the book the last couple of weeks, is that Bitcoin will just teach you lessons. And before I share any of my experience of that, I'd love to hear more, hear you speak to that more.
Yeah, for me, it became such an obvious thing, because that idea of Bitcoin the teacher comes from a bigger idea about in Taoism, this principle of non-action, which is called Wu Wei. And the idea is that if you're going to align yourself with this sort of cosmic force that you really don't have a lot of influence over, the act of trying to exert a force on that thing is probably not going to work out very well. And even if we understand that, that doesn't mean that we know that. And, so we're still going to go out and try to do all these things, this ego and all kinds of different healing that people go through to arrive at a place of stillness. In the Bitcoin world, we're always trying to get more. We've all grown up in this society of more. If we're thinking about people in the West, for sure. Yeah. So for myself, I think trying to speed things up, trying to I I tell a painful story about trading with leverage in the book, because I thought I had Bitcoin figured, and I thought this is the thing, and even now, the most listened to people in the Bitcoin space, a lot of them kind of go sideways, in my opinion, talking about it like they have got it figured out. And this is something I actually don't even think that we might have the correct words to describe it properly right now, because the collective consciousness is still so early on in trying to even make sense of what it is. So we may need new words that don't exist yet. And this is a normal part of technology too. So, yeah, Bitcoin is humbling, and it will be humbling for people because it has to do with money. So it's something that kind of can make people feel rich and make people feel poor. And the interesting thing about it is, while it's doing that, the amount of Bitcoin somebody has actually often won't be changing. So all that's changing is the internal perception of the value of that thing. I mean, and don't get me wrong, while it's changing, there is a real world consequence to the value of that thing changing. But it's a very and it never stops giving these lessons. There will always be people coming in, new people learning, and people who think they have everything. Like, this is what life is like, right? Like, just when you think you have everything figured out is when the universe is going to turn around and give you like a slap. And so, yeah, I think it's a great teacher. I forgot what I was gonna. Yeah.
No, I love that. I have a couple sides of that. One is like surrender, because for me, I thought I was so good with surrender. I'm like, I understand, like, you got to go with the flow of life, like you can't force it. And I think a lot of people, I know anyways, entrepreneurs, or even just especially people in roles where they're helping other people, got burned out from not really surrendering. And that's a big lesson too. And I think life is always giving us lessons. And, I remember the moment so specifically where I realized, wow, I was using surrender as a coping mechanism. I wasn't really surrendering. I'm like, I'll just like let myself fall and let things let be shown the way. And on a lot of levels I was, because I couldn't have built my business without that. There was no framework, there was nothing to follow that someone did before. But when I really, another layer of the lesson of surrender continuously comes through entrepreneurship for me. And what I did, I couldn't help but think, because this week specifically, your words in your book just were perfect timing because of the dip. And like, I was in a few spaces on X of people getting so triggered. And, in my life and in my work, I always say the way to, or the way through, is to. And when you're being triggered, that's a perfect opportunity for you to witness and experience what you're going through, what's coming up for you, and ultimately what you're trying to force. Like, what you think life owes you, or what you think should be happening, or how you feel about what you can't control.
Mhm.
And I just found it amazing to be in Bitcoin at this point in time, because I've been talking actually a lot on my Instagram just about road rage, because road rage is like a really great example of like something that someone can investigate for themselves, of like, why are you reacting so much to just things that happen in life? Like, yeah, people make mistakes, people don't know where to go, or people don't know the rules, or whatever it is. These are all things out of our control. And so when I was reading your book at this timely time this week, every time someone was getting triggered, I was just like, oh, they need this book, first of all. And, because there's actually such a richness in that triggering, or in that experience. And I think that that's what you're saying in your book, right?
Yeah, I think that part of what I talk about is the notion that lessons are only available for people who are really trying to tune in and pay attention to them. because life really can pass you by, and that's fine too. Like, not, we're all here to grow at different paces. You see in the, getting back to Bitcoin, you see the same kinds of people continually fixating on, the movements of the price on, 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever. And, it's a little bit like trying to guess what the weather's going to be like in 3 months, honestly. Like you can develop whatever satellite tool that you think is going to, do this with a certain degree of accuracy, but, we don't know. Right. And, so there is a massive, exercise in surrender that comes with Bitcoin that I think can be a very, very good teacher. And the other side of it, I think, is an interesting part too. I've met lots of people who are Bitcoin resistant because they would rather believe that they can, using their own smarts, do better, outperform Bitcoin. There's not going to be anybody who is going to do better than me by doing nothing, which is what you can do just by, kind of allocating it's the best performing asset ever by any metric during the time it's existed. So really, people who go all in Bitcoin do better than everyone by doing nothing. And those people probably do better than almost all the people that are even in Bitcoin trying to do something, and whether that something is piling up, adding more chips or trading in and out or whatever, trying to time it. It's like, it is the ultimate act of just of waiting. And people can even say that they want to do that, but so far Bitcoin runs in these 4-year cycles, and someone can even say, like, I'm willing to wait 4 years for this. But 4 years for most of us in this TikTok society is an eternity. And that's something that people really struggle. Like, we're 6 months, whatever, past the halving, and it's like the watched pot not boiling, and you can feel people like really experiencing this mass triggering. And what has changed? Nothing. Like, I still have the same amount of Bitcoin that I had 6 months ago. I'm not planning to sell it. So it really doesn't, I don't give it any of my energy and attention. And that's part of the message that I wanted to share, because I think that, price is the biggest recruiting tool for Bitcoin. It's what gets people excited. And that's great. It is really important aspect of drawing new people's attention to it. But it's a terrible place to live. Like, if you want to be involved with Bitcoin for longer than 6 months, the best thing you can do is never look at the price ever. And think about those other things, because it really does. It comes back to what I was talking about earlier. The problem people are trying to address with getting rich is having autonomy over their time. The problem people are solving by moving to Bitcoin is transitioning from one form of a money that devalues stored time into another that can effectively store that time. So once you've been able to store your time, that's when you can actually enjoy yourself. And that's when you can show up and be a good person. So I don't blame anyone for, road rage or these societal social issues that are bubbling up. It's because of the money. The money really is, it's everywhere. It's all the time. It affects everything. So solving that's why it's so huge for individuals, and then for communities, cities, provinces, countries, whatever. And I talked about this with Taoism, right? Taoism is something that's internal. It starts inward, like you said with the Wayne Dyer quote. When you first change what's happening for you on the inside, it changes how you show up on the outside. And if everyone starts changing their internal world, that's how we really experience a cascade of change in how we interact with each other.
Oh, that's so great too, because ultimately it brings in compassion. And I think that we're lacking compassion in our world today. And that's actually a perfect example of road rage, because it's no judgment. Like, we're all human and we all get triggered, and we're all living in this same energy that, like you said, the money has created. And I think that's the beautiful part of it, because I think part of what money creates is guilt and blame on the self. And blaming the self is the lowest vibration that there is, like blaming yourself. And if we keep blaming ourselves, then we're going to be more stressed. We're going to be rushing to get somewhere on time and be more stressed and be more frustrated at the other drivers because we're more stressed. And all of that, when we can unravel it and come back to like, oh, it's not me. Like, yeah, I can develop an awareness and I can become more present and I can, start to look at ways to change my life to make my time more valuable and appreciated. But ultimately, I think that first step is really realizing like I'm part of the environment that I'm in. And I, like probably everyone in Bitcoin, had some really hard lessons where I had a lot and I didn't realize the value of it, especially at the beginning. And then even when I did, it taught me really crazy lessons about just kind of being willing to kind of give it away because I wanted to be part of something, or whatever it is. But I'll get more specific about one thing that happened yesterday because I've been really immersed in the material, of your book. And I realized, oh, I can come to Victoria for the learning Bitcoin, and flights are like really discounted. And I have a friend there that she's also into the three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, and Bitcoin. And she lives there. And I haven't gone and visited her yet since we met online. Anyways, so I was getting like so excited. And then I messaged her. I'm like, can I stay there when I come there? And she was like, oh, I'll have to see because we have some other guests. And then right away, I started to feel like this anxiety, right? Because I was like, oh no, like maybe it's not going to work out, or I have to like, oh, now, like what, and I was like, whoa, this is like a perfect moment to practice Taoism. And like Bitcoin was already giving me that lesson of like that feeling rushed, or like somehow just not letting things be as they are and then going with them. And as soon as I had that moment where I was like, oh wow, this is exactly what we're talking about here, it just settled. It settled, and I told her, "Just let me know when you know." Like, I realized, like, it wasn't a fake, like, "It's all good." It was really like, "Oh, it's fine. Just let me know when you know." And I was thinking she was gonna tell me a couple days, and, then, like, I don't know, 15 minutes later, she's like, "Yeah, it's good," you know? And I thought, "What a perfect lesson."
Yeah. And back to the idea about road rage, I think is like, how many times has somebody, this has happened to all of us, where you get passed by somebody and then they cut you off just to make a point, and then they speed off, and then 50 feet later, you're stopped at the same red light, and they're like just literally one car, they're right in front of you. And so what was that person trying to do, right? They were trying to claim autonomy over their time, right? They were trying to get ahead, and they were forcing something. They were trying to forcefully take control of their time. And so that this is just, why do they have to do that? It's because the value of their time is being stolen, and it's being stolen from all of us. And it is impossible to build a cooperative society in conditions where everyone has a total inability to store the value of their own time, which is the one thing that is finite for each of us. We all have a finite time to spend in this physical experience. And so it's no wonder that we have a difficulty of showing up as our best selves, because all of us in some way are struggling to comprehend and make peace with this fact of the way it is, that we all have a limited amount of time, and the time that we've already spent is being intentionally devalued.
You don't even know how much my audience is gonna love that we dove more into road rage. I'm so glad you brought it back a couple times because I've been really exploring it. And you just took it to a whole nother level, of course, which is just amazing because it is, again, about compassion. But like you said, that person is actually just trying to get more time. And then unfortunately, yeah, realize when you're at the light that you were in the same time, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that's such a great awareness. I know that my viewers are going to love that we took that one step further to also, again, help us have more compassion for other people. You know, the reason that I started talking about road rage is because I'm still fairly new to Calgary and I don't drive very much because where I live, I can really walk or ride my bike to most things. And so when I drive, I don't always know where I'm going and I do make more mistakes. So people get like, I've been experiencing more anger towards me than usual. And I'm always like, "Oh, thank you. Thank you," you know? And, you know, it's just been so interesting, and then as I dove into stats, like, it's quite a problem. It creates a lot of
Mhm.
accidents. It actually causes a lot of accidents. And, you know, the more I dove into it, the more I loved looking at, you know, what might be going on inside of the person, and I really love your, you know, taking it to that next step of like, "But right, it's inevitable if we continue to be part of a system that doesn't value our time."
Mhm. Yeah, and so really at the core of it, Bitcoin is an invitation to transition to a money where each of us can just safely store our own time. And then from what you do beyond that is kind of up to you. And lots of people can have further lessons to learn beyond that. But like this
Yeah.
is really one of the most important and pressing problems for everyone. And the solution to that problem feels a little bit, strange for people,
Mhm.
but that's what it is.
Well, this has been great. I think we should probably wrap up. I know we could delve into this topic. There's so many amazing things in your book. I definitely recommend to anybody who wants to read more. You can tell I, I really went through it. The Dao of Bitcoin. And I think I saw it on Audible the other day. Is it there now?
Yeah, yeah, there's an audio version.
Oh,
It's on all the platforms, like for anybody who listens, at Spotify or wherever. It's on all the audio platforms, not
oh,
just Audible. Mhm.
awesome. That's so wonderful. Is there any last thought that you'd like to share with our viewers before we go today?
Hmm. I think always love to just talk briefly about the subtitle of the book, which is
Oh.
"Towards a Cosmology of Energy Money."
Mm.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by this concept of energy money, and I think it can be very helpful for people in making sense both of the literal and figurative applications for Bitcoin and why it works. And it's because, um, you know, money used to be a paper representation of gold. So the abstraction of the piece of paper then becoming a piece of paper with a queen on it, this was rooted in sort of an intellectual connection to something of value underneath it. So as we've gotten away from that, we have lost the understanding of how important it is that money is tied to something in reality. And Bitcoin actually derives its value from a provable amount of energy consumption that happens during the creation of new Bitcoin. So, Bitcoin, it could be said, the underlying commodity that ties Bitcoin to reality is energy. So, it is energy money. And money itself is, as we talked about, it is this also a representation of our time and energy. So, when we exchange money with each other, I had to spend my time and energy to earn money. So did you. So for me to give you money, that's an energetic exchange. That's some of my life force being traded for something that you have, a service or a good, something that you've created with your energy. So money is an energetic exchange. And to me, the synergy of figuratively exchanging our energy with a literal energy money is one of the most profound and compelling aspects of why Bitcoin is going to be this massive transformative force and will completely change everything about the way the world works.
Oh, I'm so glad you touched on that because I did have a whole part of like abundance, you know, and being a devotee of the law of attraction and just there's always new things to learn. And It's how I created my whole life and business. But what I found for myself and others is that it just wasn't working anymore. and I when the more I learned about Bitcoin and energy money, and I'd already seen money as energy, but not so much about the like my energy. Like this is my time. So I didn't also value money as much as I should have, first of
Hmm.
all. And then trying to attract it or attracting it, it at one point, because I don't really believe in this, like, oh, I've got to manifest what I want type of thing. I believe, like, you can allow, it's like the inspired action and allowing, like, which is also in the Tao, right? But what I've seen so far, and even, I mean, now listening to you even more, is that, right? Like, money is energy and it's an energy exchange. And then, of course, the law of attraction is going to be much more effective on a money that isn't um, soaked in theft and lies,
Hmm.
which are all low vibration.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
something that I
Yeah,
always,
that the brokenness of how money works now
yeah.
is like it corrupts the signal. It's like it's a frequency, it's an error in the frequency. And so what we're really doing is we're removing that and enabling the truest form of energy exchange that's been possible so far.
How exciting. That's so exciting. As I kept reading the book, I kept thinking like, "Oh yeah, like attracting Bitcoin is just a whole different energy than attracting fiat."
Hmm.
And I think that's a great point for us to finish our conversation here. And I want to thank you again. I hope you enjoyed being on the show. I really enjoyed having you, and thank you for everything that you have shared with me and our viewers of what you've learned along your way with the Tao and Bitcoin.
Oh, it's been my pleasure to come on, Heather, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, see you.
Thank you for watching. Remember to hit the subscribe and turn on the notifications so that you'll know right away when we have a new episode with another great guest. And if this episode got you wanting to buy Bitcoin, reach out to me. I'm an agent with Bitcoin Well, and I have a link down below to book a time in my calendar. And simply just book a call with me and we can get you started buying Bitcoin. And don't worry, no pressure. Let's have a conversation and see how Bitcoin can improve your life. Ciao for now.